Hello everyone and welcome to Mighty Vids 1. Today we are going to look into the story of former boxing heavyweight champion Corrie Sanders. His rise in the boxing world and later his tragic and sad, heartfelt murder. Corrie Sanders was born and raised in South Africa. He was a southpaw and did well as an amateur boxer, finishing his amateur career in the late 80s with a record of 180 fights with only 11 losses. It was in 1989 when Sanders turned professional and started knocking out people on his way up the ladder. Carrying unbelievable power with a shocking straight left hand and was known as the sniper. Only very few of his professional fights that he won went to points, and Sanders was known to KO his opponents in the very early rounds. Corrie Sanders was becoming a name to be reckoned with, winning 23 of his professional fights in a row before suffering his first defeat against Nate Tubbs on a second-round knockout, but this didn't keep him down. Sanders went on to have 10 straight wins, and won a world title in the lesser-regarded title, the WBU, beating Ross Purity on a 12th-round points decision in 1997. Then in the year 2000, on his fourth WBU title defense, Corrie Sanders lost the second fight of his career against Hasim Rahman, who beat Sanders by TKO in the 7th round. Rahman a few fights later went on to beat Lennox Lewis for the unified WBA and IBF titles. Sanders won his next 2 fights by KO in round 1 and 2, still showing he was a dangerous heavyweight, and his 2 losses had not changed that. Then his next fight was for the WBO title against Vladimir Klitschko. Vladimir Klitschko at this time only had 1 loss to his name against Ross Purity, which was 5 years earlier. Sanders had beat Purity for the WBU 6 years before this fight with Klitschko. Klitschko was just starting to get a big name at the time, only conquering the WBO title with 5 title defenses. Klitschko was the massive favorite, with the boxing commentator for the fight and many other boxing experts labeling him close to perfection. Vladimir Klitschko came into the fight super confident, but he was about to have the shock of his career. Corrie Sanders really showed what a fighter he was in this fight, against what was supposed to be a superior fighter, with all the odds stacked against Sanders. His quick hand speed and ruthless power proved too much for Klitschko, and he couldn't find any way out of Sanders' bombardment of heavy punches, knocking him down and down in round 1. Then in round 2 he dropped Klitschko twice more, and the ref ended the fight. Corrie Sanders was now WBO champion. He earned the respect he deserved to his name, and was now a high contender for the other major belts.
The left hand that Sanders is hitting him with.
And he's attacking to try to get out of trouble instead of holding. And this is not going to go well.
Sanders vacated his WBO belt in the December of that year, because he wouldn't agree to fight the WBO number 1 contender Lamont Brewster, but assigned a contract to fight for the vacant WBC title against the older of the Klitschko brothers, Vitaly Klitschko. In the build-up to the fight, Sanders would say that both Klitschko brothers fight the same, and he knew their weaknesses, and was fairly confident on beating Vitaly Klitschko. The older of the Klitschko brothers was fighting for the Klitschko name, and was seeking revenge for his younger brother's loss. The fight began on April 24, 2004. Sanders got Klitschko with some punches early on, wobbling him at times, once again showing his impressive power, but Vitaly Klitschko proved to have a better chin and slicker defense than his younger brother, and as predicted, Sanders would run out of gas. Sanders was still dangerous though, and Vitaly had to be very careful even against a tired Sanders. In the 8th round Sanders was cut, and couldn't hardly throw a punch. He was that tired, and Klitschko reigned with a flurry of punches until the ref stopped the fight. Vitaly Klitschko had won the WBC belt, and earned the respect for the brothers. Sanders showed he was still a strong fighter with dangerous punching power, but proved he didn't have the stamina if tested. Corrie Sanders had 4 more fights, but nothing even close to the level of fights he had been in before. His last fight was for the South African title in 2008, which he lost in the 1st round. Sanders was supposedly injured before going into the fight. He retired after this fight. On the 22nd of September 2012, Corrie Sanders was with family in his native South Africa celebrating his nephew's 21st birthday. Sanders was near the entrance of the restaurant with his 15-year-old daughter, and cousin. 3 armed robbers came racing in, instantly opening fire in the restaurant. He threw himself in front of his daughter to shield her from the onslaught of bullets, and was shot in the hand and stomach. He got to the ground with his daughter, and told her to pretend to be dead as he was already heavily bleeding from his wounds. Corrie Sanders died in hospital on the 23rd of September. His widow hailed him a hero, giving his life to protect their daughter from the oncoming bullets. Several days later, after a tip-off, 3 men from Zimbabwe was arrested and found with items from the robbery. The robbers had took phones, money, and other possessions from the guests at the restaurant, forcing them to lie down. They had planned and executed the robbery with brutal force, scaring the victims into giving them what they wanted and making sure they didn't dare to put up a fight. It was not known if they wanted anyone to die in the robbery, but it was a dangerous plan to shoot bullets past the guests, and obviously, they was not concerned if anyone got caught in the crossfire. All 3 men, who were Zimbabwe nationals, was in their early 20s and was first-time offenders. Hader Fish, Chris Mayo, and Samuel Mabiner were the men behind the robbery. It was indicated in court, the way the robbery was carried out, it obviously wasn't the first time they had done this sort of thing. It was impossible to pinpoint which one of the 3 men had shot and killed Corrie Sanders, so they was all tried evenly. They was all sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murder of Corrie Sanders and the robbery, and also being in possession of firearms and ammunition. The judge did not take into account there was first-time offenders, which was rightly so. Corrie Sanders was survived by his mother, son and daughter. He was 46 years old. Rest in peace, Corrie Sanders.